All right, let's focus on the Illinois side of this Illinois-Nebraska game. And there's a fire at Memorial Stadium, Joey, but all is good. According to Illinois, game goes on. Practice went on today, it sounds like, according to Brett Bielema.
Yeah, I walked by there practicing in the stadium. A little bit of excitement, I guess, depending on how you look at it. We can say excitement. No one was hurt. Doesn't sound like there's any damage, any meaningful damage, I should say. So it's a surprising alert to get on a Tuesday evening, late evening, Tuesday night. But it sounds like all's good. Crisis averted.
And it set itself up for some 2-3, 0-2 Big Ten jokes for Illinois, a fire in Memorial Stadium, but we're not.
Are you going to lead with the fire? Are you going to make a fire pun in quick hits?
Good. Do I do it? If they win, they put out the fire, right? If they lose, the fire is still blazing. I know. I do not plan on it, but man, it's sitting there for any media who want.
Someone bookmark this for when he inevitably does that on Friday night.
I'm usually pretty good about not doing that, right?
You get talked out of it. You're all on board with thinking it's going to work until someone, usually me, is like, "Hey, why don't we not?"
What did I call Altmaier? What was the nickname?
The Starkville Scrambler Slinger. And all I could think of is like the Scranton Strangler. And that's not it.
That's why it's good to have somebody working with you in the front. Work those things out. All right, Joe, we got a 6-pack of questions to get us ready for this game. And my first question for you is, Illinois is struggling. Maybe we should have seen some of this, given the staff members they lost, given the way they finished last season, given all the talent that they lost. And this is kind of based off of Devin Witherspoon. What a performance. Is now the defensive rookie of the year favorite with the pick 6, the 2 sacks, the 4 quarterback hits, just laying people out. It's so fun to watch. But obviously, Illinois misses some of that talent. So my first question to you, which player from the 2022 team does Illinois miss the most right now?
How dumb is this that my answer is not Devin Witherspoon?
Good.
I think it's Alex Palczewski.
Ooh, I like it.
The offensive line has been a problem all season. They started with Zy Chrysler at right tackle. That spectacularly failed. He gave up a lot of pressures in those first 2 games. It didn't work. So now you have a right tackle void, and you move Isaiah Adams out of his position, out of the side of the line that he's played on the first 2 years, and move him over to right tackle. And now you've compromised your left tackle spot to some degree. I think you put Alex Palczewski on this team at right tackle. You could run back effectively the same offensive line as a year ago, subbing Josh Kreutz for Alex Pihlstrom. And Josh Kreutz has been fine. I think all things considered on the offensive line for being his first year as a starter, first time as a starter in college. I think maybe that's a really hot take. But I think Alex Palczewski would solidify a lot of those front-end issues, which I think spark a lot of other offensive issues.
Yeah, I think you can make the case for a lot of guys. I mean, Devin Witherspoon's the best player among all these guys. Chase Brown, they certainly need that offensive weapon. I think Chase Brown, we're learning, probably outran some offensive line issues potentially last year, especially with those outside zones. But the offensive line was better, so Alex Palczewski could fix a big hole. Could have Isaiah Adams back at left guard. The guy I'm going with, though, I mean, Isaac Darkangelo is another guy that I think they miss. I think Dylan Rosiak is starting to play really well. I'm going with Sidney Brown. I think they really miss that guy in the middle of the defense, and probably they miss him more because Matthew Bailey is not available, right? That he is out right now. I think they miss that aggressive guy in run support. I think they miss that aggressive guy that he knows, hey, if I got the quarterback in this situation and there's a hole right in front of me for me to go pressure him, I'm going to go. He's going to pull that trigger, as he says. I think they miss his voice too. I think they really miss the leadership of Sidney Brown, the player, the middle of the defense guy. I think safety play has been okay at best for them. And I think it's such an important position in this defense. So you can make a case for so many of these guys. And it's kind of a reminder of how good those players were for them last year. But I just think just the key cog in that defense that Sidney Brown was in the middle of that defense, getting everybody lined up, tackling, putting pressure on the quarterback even, covering tight ends, covering wide receivers. I just think he was invaluable. So you could go with so many different guys here.
Yeah, I thought I should have known you were going to say Sidney Brown when I watched the film review, and Jay Lehman had that really, not to spoil too much, I watched the film review, but he pointed out Green Dog and something that Sidney Brown did quite often. And he's just a really instinctive player, man. Sidney Brown's a good pick.
All right, next question. Number 2. What stood out about the coaches' responses to Saturday's loss at Purdue? Brett Bielema, I thought on Saturday, gave us the most real response you're going to get. He called it embarrassing, right? He's talked about how this team is not playing up to what he expects, basically. And they said they're going to have some harsh conversations with the coaching staff. I thought that was the real response. Monday, he wasn't as into that, Joey. You get back a little bit. You say, all right, this is what we got to address with our team. But then I thought Barry Lunny, whether fans care about it or not, he took full accountability for the offensive struggles, even though I know it's not all on him, right? He didn't miss Henry Boyer in the end zone. He didn't drop the ball that Pat Bryant had. He's not the one that's struggling to block, but he knows it's on him to get it all to work. And even though I think they got personnel issues on the offensive line and at wide receiver, they got a quarterback going through growing pains. It's up to him to put this team in positions to succeed, and he owned that. So I thought that was a good sign. Now it's, can he figure it out? Aaron Henry, I thought, was a little bit more interesting in that he kept focusing on, we got to be better on first and second down. We got to be better on first and second down. But you asked him about the edge rushers and the pass rushers and the rotations and all those things. And he kept going back to first and second downs. And I just think third down, getting off the field is really important, though he did mention penalties are just killing them. And he did say that, they missed a bunch of tackles, 18 tackles. So I thought Lunny handled it the way in the media you're supposed to handle it. I think the most important thing is how you get your team to perform on Friday or Saturday, of course.
Yeah, I think just going back from the totality of Saturday to now, I think it's still – I feel like we're a broken record at this point because we keep talking about offensive identity. And
Barry said that. I thought it feels like a broken record.
It does, and there's just been no answer to it, right? Like there's not been a clear-cut answer. I think we need to distill what offensive identity, like we need to understand what it is too, because it's not just we want to be a power run team or we want to do like those things factor into it, but I don't think that's just the only piece of the offensive identity puzzle. Brett Bielema mentioned it. What do you do on third down? What do you do in the short yardage, goal lines? Who are you in these situations? And that's just not really the whole picture hasn't manifested. We know these teams. We know Brett Bielema. We know Barry Lunny. They want to run the football. They want to be able to run the football effectively. That's part of making up the identity, but it's just little nuances of things that just haven't really seen a complete picture. So I just think the search for that and Brett Bielema stepping in and saying, maybe I've got to be a part of these conversations and force this conversation to happen was also really, really, that was the most interesting thing when we left West Lafayette on Saturday.
Yeah, because Brett brought it up. The reason I followed up about you keep mentioning offensive identity. What do you do to address it? And I thought that's when he talked about we got to have harsh conversations and all that. And I thought that was the most telling thing. Not that I thought it was like, oh, Barry Lunny's definitely on the hot seat or anything like that. I just think he's like, I got to insert myself into this to make sure I'm putting my coaches in position to coach our players and put them in the best position. And I know what they want to do. Barry knows what Brett Bielema wants. And what Brett Bielema hired Barry Lunny for was he hired Tony Peterson to run this traditional pro-style offense, right? That was big, physical, get downhill, and then you have a play-action pass game. Brett decided, man, after the first year, I need something that's a little bit more modern, but still has my pro-style tendencies, still is physical, but gets the guys the ball in space, kind of this modern, what do they call it, tempo offense. And right now, this year, their difference of what last year is, Joey, is they hold the ball longer because they want to push the ball downfield, but they don't run the ball well enough on first and second down to set themselves up in good situations. Defenses are just teeing off on this offensive line. They're running a lot of stunts that put these offensive linemen in some difficult situations that a young, inexperienced guys are struggling to handle. And it's not just like one magic bullet here. They have to run the football better, number one. But two, I think Barry is realizing maybe I can't do exactly what we want to do. Maybe I think it's, Jay brought it up, it's 12 and 13 personnel a little bit more. Getting more physical up front, establishing those on first and second down, even if it's play action, rollouts, things like that, just to give us a little bit more chance in the run game so we can set up, 2nd and 3 where I can take these big shots or I can run and keep them off balance. I think it's all kind of coming down. And I think they're realizing, Brett Bielema kept saying, we know who we are now. We have to coach them based on who they are. And that's an offensive line that struggles. And that's, besides Isaiah Williams, offensive players that struggle to get separation.
Yeah, I think they kind of fell in love with the idea, and Luke Altmaier's arm is something to really like and something to really try to scheme around because it's a good arm. He has a good arm. He can throw the deep ball well, accurately. It's a pretty ball. I think they maybe thought the wide receivers were going to take a bigger step than what they have this season. And I think it's probably time to dial that back and get more quick hitters. You're not getting the separation and you're not getting the protection. And those quick hitters, those RPOs, which also falls on Luke Altmaier, those were so successful last season with Tommy DeVito and just being able to – there's a lot of value. We've seen a lot of value in 5-yard passes. I mean, there's a ton of value there for a team that faces third and forever a lot of times.
And to be honest with you, it's things that Casey Washington and Pat Bryant are good at. Those slant routes, they're pretty good at. They're big, physical, but they haven't been getting separation down the field. So I think that's what they're talking about. But to go off of your point, they need Altmaier to make better decisions in that RPO game. Like looking back at some of that Purdue film, there's some RPO things he didn't get correct. And that's part of the growing pains of a young
sophomore quarterback, right?
Yeah, of a really 7th start it's going to be on Friday night. Those are the growing pains we talked about that you're going to have to deal with. You're hoping the upside of the down the field passing game. And we've seen it with Luke Altmaier and Isaiah Williams, just haven't seen it enough with the rest of this group. All right, question number 3. Zy Chrysler, Josh Gesky, both went down at Purdue. Brett Bielema told you guys today they're questionable on Friday. So how do you expect Illinois to kind of address these offensive line issues for?
Well, we should say it sounded a little more optimistic about Josh Gesky's possibility. Brett Bielema said he's questionable, although he had a really good day yesterday and a really good day today. Got a very good chance of that happening. But in the event, questionable, we saw Reggie Love was questionable last week, and he didn't play. So in the event that both of those guys are out, I think you looked obviously to Jordan Slaughter. This is the exact role this guy fits in on this football team. I think even if one of them is out, Jordan Slaughter is your next man up. Yeah. And then Hunter Whiteneck would be the next guy. If both are out, I would expect to see him in there. It wasn't a perfect first experience for him last week at Purdue. He struggled. But he's a guy they're high on. He's a guy who's worked his way in there. But I do find it interesting. I've literally got half of my notebook typed before you interrupted me and said, get on this podcast immediately. Brandon Henderson was the name Brett Bielema brought up, and I'm still very pumped the brakes on that because he is still a true freshman. And until we see it, like to me, when I hear that,
he's not your right tackle. He is not your right tackle, right?
No. In fact, Brett Bielema said they moved him. They've been primarily repping him at guard this season or this week. And I would assume to be in the event that one or both of those guys can't go. So do I think Brandon Henderson is going to start against Nebraska? No. Will he be a rotation player? I would still lean to probably not, but I think that is if one of those two gets hurt and you're already down one or two, you're going to need somebody. And it's telling about his skill, his quick development that he's in that conversation, but I don't want to mistake that for an ideal situation either.
Yeah, it also tells you about the depth issues that they're going through right now. If you have to put him in, what would it be, the top 7? Oh, well, I guess it'd be top 8 because Barlev would be involved in that as well. If I think Chrysler would be more likely to be out than Gesky, is Bielema talked about today, and the way Chrysler left the field the other day, it just felt like it was more severe. But it does tell you about the depth issues they're having. And yeah, Hunter Whiteneck's first game was not great. Slaughter's been serviceable. I don't think it's necessarily been better than Chrysler. I think he's been better than Chrysler in pass pro, but in the running game, I think Chrysler's been a little bit better. So I don't think any of these are, I keep using this phrase or term, magic bullet. Like I don't think any of these guys are going to fix it. That's why I think it's got to be more schematic. I think it's got to be more 12 personnel, more max protect. I think the running backs have to protect a little bit more. And I think Luke Altmaier's got to be better. And I brought that up with Barry Loney this week. Like, it's not all on the offensive line. Luke Altmaier needs to get rid of the ball quicker. And when guys are open, he needs to get rid of it. He seems to be letting things develop a little bit too much. Sometimes there's Casey Washington open on a little slant for 10 yards. You got to take that. That's what Tommy DeVito did. You take those throws, you move the chains, and you're not always going for the home run. So the processing has to quicken up a little bit for Luke Altmaier. And you hope, now that he's getting into close to the second half of his first season as a starter, that those things start to improve, because he's to blame for some of these things too, and he's got to take better care of the ball. You can't be handling the ball like he did at the goal line against Purdue to give them 6 points.
No, you're right, and I think fairly the offensive line has been questioned,
Yeah,
and it's
it's
more than
point.
right, very more deserved, but more than deserved rather. But man, he's got to have a little bit faster of an internal clock, and some of that's probably like I get it. And Barry talked about it. He's been kind of peeking at the rush a little bit. I understand you've been teed off on for a lot of times this season, and his legs are valuable, but it's just that balance. It is what it is with the offensive line. And those two have got to marry whatever they can together right now to try to string some sort of sustained drives because we're just not seeing that from this team.
All right, question number 4, Joey. What concerns you most about the defense right now?
Allowing nearly 50% of third downs to be converted. I mean, that I know there's been a lot of discussion about the rotations, and understandably so, of Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph and them being on the field for thirds. And it's hard to get them back out there when the offense doesn't sub. And I would imagine when offensive coordinators see 4 and 88 on the sideline, they're in no hurry to sub. They want to keep this thing going as long as they can, as long as their personnel will allow. There's also, they're playing a lot of snaps, and that's because there's sustained drives. 50%, almost 50%, it's like 48 point something of sort percent of third downs converted. That's a ton.
Well, can I bring up the snaps discussion? Because I know it's been a big one for fans. Like, why is Johnny Newton, Keith Randolph off the field? Johnny Newton's playing he's playing 80.7% of snaps. He played 86.2 last year. Randolph is playing 75% of snaps. That's more than he played last year, 71.2. Gabe Akis last year played 60% of snaps, this year 52. But if you go snaps per game, Newton is 7 more than last year. He's averaging 63. He was at 56 last year. Randolph, 58 snaps compared to 46 last year. Akis, 40 snaps. He was at 38.5 last year. So those guys are actually playing more snaps, but Illinois' defense is on the field for way more snaps. So that's why we're noticing the rotation more, because they're on the field way more than last year when their defense was just getting off the field so easily.
Yeah, they've got to clean that up, because then you get yourself into situations where you're in a third and manageable defensively, called a 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, but your studs that would have been like their 12th straight play or whatever the case, probably a little high, a little exaggeration, but that's the point being, you notice it when those guys aren't on the field. And, meanwhile, the opposing teams have converted a first down a few times, not necessarily always on third. I do want to bring up a stat I found yesterday that I didn't have prepared. Illinois has given up first down. So they've given up 120 first downs in total, not all third down, just in total. Opposing teams have 120 first downs. 17 of those have come by way of penalty.
It's amazing.
That is an absurd number.
Can I follow up on that stat? There was a great stat you brought up, so I looked into it a little bit more. Last year, they actually gave up like more penalty first downs, and the share of it was like 26 of their 67 first downs. They allowed 67 first downs last year. It's insane. But 26.
That's a mind-blowing stat, by the way.
26 first downs in an entire season by penalty, 2 per game. This year, they're giving up 3.4 per game. And those, as Aaron Henry says, half of those drives where they have 10 plus penalty yards, they're ending in touchdowns. Like, teams are ending in touchdowns. Those are killers.
And I do want to bring up, and I think Brett Bielema mentioned a little bit of this on Saturday, some of those penalties have changed. Not all, but some of those have changed from post-whistle or post-snap type penalties to more judgment calls, whether it be a pass interference or holdings, maybe a little less judgment, but still a judgment call, versus the unsportsmanlike. You still see those. Which isn't to try to excuse any of them, because it's just happening too much. You've got to have a better sense. But I do think that has a little bit shifted from those first few games, where now it's just their judgment calls, and Illinois they've got to play cleaner in those moments.
I will say Kanena Odaluga got away with 2 of them probably. That should have been
posted. Absolutely.
I do think that's part scouting, though, because this is a handsy defense, right? It is a handsy secondary. I think dares the referees to call it. And I think that's been scouted a little bit. Say, hey, throw it up. They're going to give us a chance. Like, they're going to give us a chance with how handsy they are. So it's just something to watch moving forward. I'm going to probably bring this up later, Joey, but their pass rush is not good enough. Whether that's scheme and blitzing more, which I talked about it with Jay. I just saw two different styles of play calling last week with the way it's not that Illinois doesn't blitz, and I don't have the numbers on me to compare how much they blitzed last year to this year. It could be similar, but it just feels like it's one, not happening as much, and two, it's not as effective. We saw some things. I liked what they do with Kaneno Odeluga and James Kurtz on their dime package. Get some fast guys up there that can really cause some havoc with those stunts. But they need more out of Gabe Backus, Seth Coleman, and Alec Bryant. Like they hired Charlie Bolin to get more out of the pass rush. That is not happening right now. Those guys have combined for 14 pressures through 3 games. That's not good. That's not a pass rush, and they have 1 sack between all 3 of those guys.
Can I bring up I just did this. I asked Brett BLM about the pressures today, and it's been a big point of conversation. I looked up according to PFF, which take it for what it is, but stats are usually a little more realistic than some of the grades. Illinois has 55 or 59 pressures generated this season from their defensive players. 20 of those are from Johnny Newton. 20. 8 are from Keith Randolph. So your law firm has accounted for 28 of 59 pressures. There's only 2 other teams in the Big Ten who have generated fewer pressures per PFF than Illinois. And that's Ohio State. I don't think you would have had that on your bingo board. Would you have? I would not have. They have 52, and Northwestern. The Northwestern's always like this team's not going to be last in this category because Northwestern exists right now. Yeah. They have 50. For reference, Penn State leads the Big Ten with 129. Purdue has 107. Wisconsin has 97.
That's a great number, the Purdue one, because of the defense they play, but because I think the talent is similar. Like I think Nick Scorton, look at him, Joey, and it's like, wow, that's what they look like. Kydron Jenkins is a really good college football player, but Illinois' defensive line is better. And I don't like Gabe Backus and Seth Coleman. Like they should be putting up similar numbers to Skurton and Jenkins, and they're not right now. So whether that's scheme, whether it's those guys, their technique, or whatever they're doing, like those guys need to be more productive.
I do wonder, and we've seen more drop backs or maybe some more linebackers kind of hugging on that first down marker more zone. I do wonder if they've maybe overcompensated trying to protect a younger secondary. But like at some point, you're an aggressive defense. You are an aggressive defense. You've had a lot of success being that. I mean, do you just live it? I don't know. Like, what's the answer? Because we just talked about all the pass interference and all the penalties and the yards. You can look at all of that. So what is the answer here?
Yeah, I don't listen. I get the predicament they're in, but my front should be my strength, and it's not a big strength right now. I don't even know if it's a strength compared to other. Like, do teams look at Illinois right now and say, outside of Johnny Newton, does it scare you? Like, does Gabe Backus scare them any? I don't know. And I don't know if it's their fault or if it's the play calling or whatever it is. But I feel like I watched it for 2 years with Ryan Walters compared to what I saw under Lovie Smith. I would err on the side of aggression. I always say this, I'm sorry for being repetitive, but put these quarterbacks under pressure, disrupt the backfield, and make them throw into tight windows. And if they beat you, they beat you. If they get a screen pass on you during the game, they get a screen pass on you during the game. But to nickel and dime you down the field like these teams are doing, and then to have a penalty on third down, like that's tough for me to live with. I'd rather be the aggressor.
Yeah, you got to – we've seen offenses at Illinois or elsewhere. It's hard to put together 9, 12, 13 play drives.
Without a
it's just hard to do. So try to make them beat you, I guess. I don't know, man. It's kind of a catch-22, but I'm with you. I err on the side of be aggressive and look, a lot of college quarterbacks.
And I think it's fun for these guys to play in. Right. I think that's another thing. Maybe it gets them teeing off a little bit and gets them to have a little bit more fun.
A little swagger, a little confidence, right?
It's probably a null discussion against Nebraska, which struggles to throw the ball, but I think just looking forward. All right, next question, number 5. Who leads the Illini in rush attempts against Nebraska?
I want to just
do it.
Go nuts. I want to go nuts with it. Yeah, okay. Caden Fagan. I don't know what Reggie Love's status is. I mean, it sounds like Reggie Love, he's practiced the last 2 days. That's the other injury note that we need to bring up in this podcast. He's practiced the last 2 days. He was game time last week at Purdue. I would expect him to play.
I'd expect him.
I think he'll start as well. Now, but is he limited, right? Like, what is there a pitch count on him? Those are things we don't know. If Illinois knows, they're sure as heck not going to tell us. But I think it's just every week that passes, and I know that a lot of these snaps have come in what you could probably reasonably describe as garbage time with Caden Fagan. But the eye test still exists. Yes. And he looks explosive, and he's big, and he's hard to bring down. And I think more than anything, we heard it, and I asked Brett Bielema about this today. Brett Bielema, remember earlier in the season, he would say when he touches the ball, our guys are excited to see him run. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But that was the general sense is our guys want to see him go. Isaiah Adams, he have NFL potential. He have team captain status. So we need to get the ball, maybe get some more touches. That to me was such a meaningful sentence coming from who it came from. Not like these guys shared a team forever and now he wants to see his guy get more. That was a really meaningful sentence to me. And I think Caden Fagan has earned that trust of his teammates to go out there and run the ball.
And even if a lot of his yards have come in late in games that have not been competitive, right? I do think we saw last week at the end of the first half, right? I know they're probably playing a little bit of pre.
People mentioned that today.
That was against their Purdue starting defense, and he burst through the hole, and you just saw it. Like everyone can see. You don't need to be a football expert to see. Oh, that guy's big. That guy's explosive. That guy's got some wiggle to him. He looks like the most talented running back. So Joey Wagner and every message board poster has been sitting there, Caden Fagan more. I didn't know if I thought Reggie Love was playing pretty well before the injury. You saw Josh McCray play well against FAU. I got it. Why Caden Fagan wasn't rushed into this, because I didn't know if he could perform in those moments against those kind of defenses. He has. The last 2 weeks, he has performed, and you've just seen this burst out of him. And I think getting that experience has been really important. I think for Malik Elzy, all those guys, Kenari Wilcher, just getting on the field, getting those jitters out that I've done this before. For Malik Elzy, I've had a drop. It's not the end of the world. I can come back. Caden Fagan, I didn't get that 4th and 1. Next time I know it, maybe I can do a little bit better. Even though that wasn't his fault.
Run behind a different offensive line.
That's a tough part of not having a directional school on the schedule, an FCS team on the schedule early on is those guys couldn't do that. But now you've seen it, and Brett Bielema sees it. The players see it. Barry Loney sees it. I think he's going to get 10 plus carries, and I don't know if I can put Reggie Love in for that. I think Caden Fagan right now looks like a better option than Josh McCray. And from Brett Bielema today, sounds like Aiden Wofford is going to continue to be a part of this rotation. He's got to block better. That's for sure.
Yeah. So we both went Caden Fagan?
Yeah, Caden Fagan.
Oh, let's dance. I converted you.
Over under 11.5.
It's a good number.
I'll go over.
I think I will too, because I think in an ideal world, Illinois gets the ball with 5 minutes left in the game and runs the snot out of it, and it's Caden Fagan.
Well, that's when Josh McCray, I wouldn't mind coming in the game because he's pretty good at it.
Yeah, 11.5 is good. I'm going to put that in for our over-unders. You didn't get a lot of submissions, I understand. Maybe there's not a lot of buzz right now. 11.5 for Caden Fagan.
All right. Question number 6. Which player or position group is most in the spotlight for you against Nebraska? I will let you go first, Joe.
I think I don't just going to be cheating because I want to take up 2, but that's the way we do our PFF grades every Sunday. I'm going to say the defensive front. This is a team that likes to run the football against an Illinois defense that has struggled to stop the run. I think the defensive front needs to shut that down. Be the defensive front you can be. That includes the linebackers, of course. Be that defensive front you can be and make Nebraska throw the ball. Make them throw. They do not do it effectively.
This is the second time I'll say this on the podcast because I brought it up with Mike Schaefer. 3rd and long, so 7+ yards. Nebraska this season, and when they pass the ball on 3rd and long, they are 6 for 26 in getting the first.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So if you listen, it's not easy when they fill that box and they're going to run, but you should have the defensive talent to do it. This offensive line is not great for Nebraska. Your defensive, Denzel Jackson, got to have your best game as a nose tackle. Johnny Newton, Keith Randolph. This is a Keith Randolph game. You're in that 4-5 technique. I'm sorry, you can bring him up, but he's got to be disruptive up there. The outside linebackers, they'll run the option, old school option, not zone read option. Quarterback rolls out and pitches the ball. They got to be good. I would really highlight the linebackers. I thought Dylan Rosiak had moments. He missed tackles against Purdue, but he had moments that you're looking for from the linebackers of like that linebacker busted through the blocking and hit that guy really hard for a play at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. We have not seen that from Tariq Barnes. We have not seen it a bunch from Kenenna Odeluga. We're starting to see James Kreutz play more. Like you need that violent physicality, decisiveness, and to get through some blocks. So I think Rosiak's really important there too. But I hate to cheat here. Your quarterback has to play well. Watching that film at Purdue, Luke Altmaier made some plays, but he also left a lot of plays out there. Really hurt you with that fumble. Needs to be better getting rid of the ball. I understand he doesn't have a lot of help right now on the offensive line. The wide receivers outside of Isaiah Williams are not helping him a bunch, but he's got to make the throws when they're there. Can't miss that throw to Henry Boyer. He's just got to play better. And I don't think he's been the biggest problem of the offense, but it's time for him to start looking more like a veteran now. So to win Big Ten games, they need Luke Altmaier just be a little bit better in his decision-making.
Yeah, he hasn't been the biggest problem, but you also need him right now on your team to be the biggest solution.
Yes.
I think it's the best way I can put it.
No, it's a great way of putting it. All right, pick to click. Offense. I don't think anybody we would have picked last week would have won because we can't pick Isaiah Williams, and rarely are we going to pick one offensive lineman. Julian Pearl was fantastic in that game. He looked like an NFL player.
They were really excited with how Julian Pearl played, by the way, last week.
Phenomenal. He was physical. He was phenomenal in pass sets. And to be honest with you, I know Isaiah Adams, like the PFF grades are not good for him. I thought he had his best week at right tackle last week. Gave up the one sack, got beat on the inside. But I thought the outside guys held up decently well. The interior just got blown up with some of those stunts. The running backs did not help in pass coverage. But you picked Luke Altmaier, and I picked Josh McCray. Both those guys had touchdowns, but accounted for the 2 touchdowns Illinois had, or 3, I guess. But I don't think either of us won that one. But who you got? Offense pick to click.
I'm going to take the guy we talked about who we think is going to lead the team in rushing. I'm going to cheat all day on that and take Caden Fagan. I think it's time. Like, again, remember the same conversation we had with Malik Elzy early in the season? It's like, you're always hesitant because like words matter and like trying to not put so much on this guy. Like he's the savior of this or that of the offense, or he's going to be this. But I think there's enough snaps, enough handoffs right now to say he's close. Yeah. He's clearly working his way into having that opportunity. So I'm going to take him. We'll see what happens.
I'm tempted to take a tight end if I think they're going to play more 12 or 13.
I figured you'd take Tip Ryman right off the gate.
But that's the only thing. Like I really want to take a wide receiver, Joey, not named Isaiah Williams, because I do feel those slants, if they go more to this RPO game, are going to be available. But I'm just trying to think who plays more snaps than Pat Bryant or Casey Washington. Probably Casey Washington. But
is this the first career touchdown game or first receiving touchdown game for Casey Washington? Do you
thinking about it?
Oh
yeah. Let's go, Casey Washington, first career. If I get that, I win automatically, right? He could have one catch for 10 yards.
I'll go back and give you last week's win too.
If I'm calling something like that. Whoa.
Oh yeah, it's an alert.
Did we both get it at the same time?
I didn't, but I thought you were so excited for your Casey Washington pick that you set up some sort of alert.
That could not have gone better. Now we need to do that more often whenever we make a cold call.
Oh my God.
All right, defense pick to click. Last week I picked Gabe Backus. You picked Nicario Harper. I don't think either of those won. Who would have been the winner there? Rosiak? But his second half wasn't great. His first half was great.
I would take it. Do you also keep your phone on loud? Because I just got the alert and I didn't.
Oh, no, it's on silent. I'm kind of glad the alert goes off, man.
Well, I'm a little concerned that mine did not. I'm going to need you to call or text if something comes up.
Just a test? I should probably make sure we're not in trouble.
It was just a test. I saw something yesterday. It was just a test.
This is just a test of the national.
I think Dylan Rosiak last week would have been the one, right?
Yeah. Who you got?
I'm going to go with Keith Randolph. And Keith Randolph's a guy who obviously, for everything that you mentioned and the way stopping the run, he also he plays very emotionally in ways that I don't find to be very detrimental for him. I feel like there's a fine line for a lot of guys. There's a face mask here or there, but he usually channels it pretty correctly. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if the comments from Ryan Walters post game have trickled back to the defensive line room where he said, paraphrasing, but he said, take the lesser of two evils if you're trying to decide between Keith and Johnny, and we didn't want to run at Johnny.
Which was, it's the right decision.
I get it, right? Like one guy you're talking about a top half of the first round potential draft pick. Keith Randolph should be a draft pick as well, but you covered Keith as long as I have, Jeremy. He seems like a guy who, if that found his way back, would fire him up a little bit. He probably knows his team needs a spark. He's a team captain. I think it's him, and I think Johnny Newton's going to understandably get a lot of attention. And when he does, that's Keith Randolph time.
So what is that, like a tackle and a half plus per loss or for loss?
Or a sack. But given it's Nebraska, I would say it's probably a tackle and a half plus.
Yeah. It's a big game for Denzel Jackson at center with the way they run the ball.
His is probably more measured in team rushing success, right? Because his individual stats aren't going to be nuts.
It's hard to pick a nose tackle for this, but boy, Calvin Avery at times this year has been missed. We could have gone with him too at the first question. I'm going to go Rosiek. I've seen flashes, man, the last 2 weeks of a guy that I thought we were hearing about during the spring and what we saw during the spring. We actually saw some scrimmages, and he was making plays. He was violent at the point of attack, and you're starting to see him make plays behind the line of scrimmage. And that linebacker is going to be incredibly important against this Nebraska offense, which wants to run the ball. Just run the ball down your throat. It's old school Nebraska offense, kind of like what Tommy Frazier would have ran. Not as good athletes in it, but I just feel like you need your linebackers to play their best game. So I think Dylan Rosiek's going to get a lot of tackles, but for me, it's about making those plays at the line of scrimmage and not 7 yards down the field.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that we're at a point. If we can't pick Johnny and I pick Keith, is there a secondary player right now, right this minute, that you would feel like would be a pick to click?
I mean, it's time for some interceptions, man. It is really time to turn those pass breakups or that tight coverage into big plays. Miles Scott had the pick six, which changed the game against Toledo. He's leading the team in tackles because that's not a good thing, but like he is right now. Even though I think he's been okay in run support, they need those guys to start making those plays. I thought Xavier Scott was really good last week. You didn't hear from the slot receivers all that much, but boy, those guys in the perimeter really hurt you. So I just don't know if it's that game. Like you should be able to play man coverage with Miles Scott over the top against, Nebraska that's got Billy Kemp, who's a good player, but doesn't scare you. Illinois held him to 0 catches last year, had 5 or 6 for 55 the year before when Virginia crushed you. Marcus Washington's got some hands issues. He can make plays down the field, kind of like Pat Bryant, but it's not a passing attack that scares you. So for me, it's all about up front.
Yeah, they don't lean into trying to be a passing attack. You want to talk about a team that knows its identity offensively? It's Nebraska, man.
They want to win this game 14-10. That's what they want to do.
Hey, Brett, I don't know that Brett Bielema would argue if that went the other way for his team, right? You go 14-10, fine by Bielema. This thing kicks off at 7. We could be looking at 9:30. We're out of there. Run the heck out of it.
Not with Fox's commercials, Joey.
let me dream.
Not with Fox's commercials. Mark Helfrich on the call, by the way. It's a monster game, Joey. If Illinois has any thoughts of going to a bowl game, this is the kind of game you got to win. Now they could lose it, and the Big Ten West still doesn't scare me outside of Wisconsin. Maryland scares the heck out of me, but those teams are up next after this. So like that's what's terrifying for Illinois is the schedule. While it gives you some opportunities, if you can't beat a Nebraska, what opportunities are there?
You could be looking at 2-6 real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a scary proposition. You win this, you're at 3. You've still got Minnesota, Northwestern, Indiana, teams that you should reasonably be favored against, even though I know it's on the road at Minneapolis. That team looks like it's got some issues to resolve. You need this.
Issues, right?
Yeah, but they got a defense too.
Yeah, defense and special teams, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's still a path, and someone might hear that and roll their eyes, and I understand that because this has not been the most encouraging first 5 games that anyone has ever seen put on tape. But, I mean, those are 3 winnable games, right? And you get this one, and you could really set yourself up.
Yeah, if you lose to Nebraska, I think you're going to win maybe one more game. Like, that's how it's just the way you've played. It would make me feel like you can win one more game maybe. If you beat Nebraska, yeah, I think you got plenty of opportunities to potentially get to a bowl game still. And maybe if you can upset Maryland's going to be very difficult to me, but if you can upset Wisconsin, upset Iowa, all of a sudden, you can still have a really good year. If they don't get this one, they're not going to have a good year. Like, that's pretty.
The West is so bizarre. Like, if you would have told me after that game on Saturday, like during our podcast on Saturday, like, hey, there's still, like, as bad as this has looked at times, and it's looked pretty bad at times, the West is just so disastrous. I'm going to miss it.
And you got
what a hard breakup this is going to be.
And you got Indiana on the schedule, which helps you out. Now the crossovers, you thought Maryland might be a little easier than they were, but that's a good team. That
team looks like a ton. Yeah.
Yeah. They look like, I don't know if they're as good as Penn State, but boy, the offense is better than Penn State's. And Illinois, the way they're playing offense and defense right now. And that's the thing. Like, people listening to this are going, no, there's no path if you don't beat Nebraska. No, not the way they play like this. And, half of season in, if they lose to Nebraska, would certainly be that case. But you're just looking for a full game where they give themselves a chance to win. Joey, give yourself a chance to win going into the fourth quarter. They have not done that against their 3 Power 5 opponents.
No, that's the scary part, right? It's the Power 5 opponents. The stats are kind of lopsided in those games.
All right, Joey Wagner, thank you, buddy. I'll see you Friday night.
Thanks, man.